writing the equation of sine or cosine given its graph. All right, so instead of graphing this time, we're going to be given a graph and then we find its equation. And we have two different situations going on here. So this first one, we're told there's no minus c and there's no plus d. So what that means, because there's no minus c, that means that there's no phase shift, and there's no plus d, so there's no vertical shift either. No vertical shift, no phase shift. So because we know it hasn't moved left or right, and we know that it's starting at the top, that has to be cosine. Cosine starts at top or bottom. And this one starts at the top. So this is a cosine situation. So I'm going to write down my thought process here. There's no phase shift. And so the cycle starts at the top of the period, starts at its peak. So this means it's cosine with positive a, because we're starting at the top. So we know that our function is going to be something of the sort y equals a cosine of bx, and that this number right here needs to be positive. And in fact, because there's been no vertical shift, this distance right here, right? We know this is the midline. This has to be the midline. And the distance right here is 3. So that means the amplitude is 3, which means A has to be positive 3. Amplitude is 3. We know A is supposed to be positive. So A is positive 3. Is my logic? We know that B signifies a period change. B signifies a period change. And that clearly has happened here because this thing doesn't get back up to the top again until 6 pi. And in fact, we know that that's what one cycle of cosine looks like, right? It makes that C shape. One cycle of cosine looks like that. So that means that the period has to be 6 pi, because that would be from here to here. The period is equal to 6 pi. We need to find B. We know what the period is. So what we're going to do is use the formula that period is equal to 2 pi over B, and we will solve for B. We know the period is 6 pi, so I'm going to replace period with 6 pi. So 6 pi is equal to 2 pi over B. To get the B out of the denominator, I am multiplying both sides by B. So I have 6 pi times B is equal to 2 pi. To get B by itself, I am dividing both sides by 6 pi. The pi's will cancel, and we are left with B is equal to 2 over 6, which is 1 over 3. So B is 1/3. Y is equal to cosine of 1/3 x. And that's the answer. That's it. Boom, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Not so bad, right? Not so bad. All right. Let's do a more complicated one with a period change, a phase shift, maybe a phase shift. When you're told that the equation needs to look like this, these values here could be 0, or they might not be. You just never know. All right. So here's my thought process. I'm looking at this one. And I'm thinking to myself, we can figure out A, or at least the amplitude, very easily. We know that the top of the function is at 2. We know that the bottom of the function is at -6. Right? The distance between 2 and -6, that's the same thing as doing 2 minus -6, which would be 8. Right? There's 2 here, there's 6 here. The total distance between the two of those is 8. We write 8, and we know amplitude is half of that total distance. Amplitude is half the distance from top to bottom. Thusly, amplitude is equal to 4. Amplitude is equal to 4. So if I go 4 units up, 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe I'll do that with a laser pointer. Get 1, 2, 3, 4 units up right here. This one should be my midline, right at -2. So I went up, amplitude of 4, and look, there's 4 units this way as well. So it is the midline. So the next thing we know is that the midline is at y equals -2. And if the midline is at y equals -2, that means that D is equal to -2. So right now we have y equals a. I'll fill in a in a second. We don't know if it's sine or cosine. We're still looking to find that out. Of bx minus c plus d. We have already said that a. Oh, no, we haven't said what a is. We found the amplitude, but we don't know what a is. A is either +4 or -4, but we haven't determined that yet. We have determined that D is -2. So we just come in here, we'll put a -2 here. All right, we're getting somewhere. So let's go for the next thing, which would be, which is it sine or is it cosine? If there's no phase change, which all sine functions are shifted cosine functions because they overlap one another, they're the same shape. So I could write a sine function or I could write a cosine function and it could represent the same graph. However, in this case, I like the fact that the midline, it hits right at the midline right here at the y-axis. So I'm going to say that there's no phase change and that this is a graph of sine because that seems easiest to me. If it was hitting in a weird spot, so let's say that at the y-axis, it was like, here, let me just draw this and then if it had hit a weird spot at the y-axis, like maybe it hit like this where it didn't hit right at the midline, then you would get your choice of whether you call it a sine function or a cosine function. But in this case here, no big deal. We're going to call this starting at the y-axis. So starts at x equals 0. Which is the y-axis, which means there's no phase shift. And if there's no phase shift, that means that c is equal to 0. So c doesn't exist. Just erase it down here. Boom. And now we're looking at, let me highlight them. We're looking at that chunk right there. So it looks like one period of sine takes 8 units because it goes from 0 to 8. So one period of sine is equal to 8 units. Not 8 pi, just 8. And additionally, because of the shape of this, this has to be sine because it starts at the midline, and it has to be a positive a because it goes up first. All right. So that means that a is positive and the amplitude is 4. So the amplitude is 4, a is positive. That means that a is positive 4 instead of negative 4. So now we can fill that in. 4, and we know that it's sine because it starts at the midline. All right, the last thing is figuring out b, and it's going to be a similar process to what we did over here in this previous problem. We know the period is 8. We also know that the formula for period is, so the period is 8, and the formula is 2 pi divided by b. 8 is equal to 2 pi divided by, oops. I went to go solve for period again, but we're solving for b here. I need to multiply both sides by b. 8b is equal to 2 pi. Divide both sides by 4. Not by 4, by 8. And then we get b is equal to, just move all this up a teeny tiny bit. You get b is equal to 2 pi over 8, which is the same thing as pi over 4. Pi over 4. So I'll just erase the b. I'll put in a pi over 4. And that's our final answer. Now, you could absolutely have this be a cosine function instead. And what I think I'm going to do right now, if you're happy with this answer, then you just go on and you enjoy. I want to show alternatively how you can do this problem with a phase shift and a cosine function. So if you're interested in seeing that, something a little nifty, you keep listening now. Otherwise, that's the end of this. That's the end of this worksheet and this section. So if you're happy, you go ahead and oops, boop, boop, boop. You go ahead and just, where's paste? Come on. Paste. There we go. You go ahead and leave if you don't want to see this, but I'm going to show this in a cosine form where we do y equals a cosine of bx minus c plus d. And the work that we did before is still relevant. D is still equal to 2. That's still relevant. The amplitude is still 4. And we need to check, and the period should still be 8. So we know D is equal to, what was it, -2? -2. We know that the amplitude is 4. We know that the period should be 8. And we will check that when we go to highlight a single cycle of cosine. So the cosine cycle, you can see one right here. You can do this in so many different ways because you could also say that this is a cosine graph right here. I could choose either of those pieces and I could write a equation for either of them. Maybe I'll choose this piece. I wasn't planning on choosing this one, but maybe I'll choose this piece here. All right, so I'm going to choose this piece. This piece goes from -2 up to 6. It goes from -2 up to 6. which means the period is 8. It takes 8 units before it repeats itself. There is a phase shift here. The phase shift is equal to -2. So phase shift is equal to -2. And we have a formula for phase shift, right? Phase shift is equal to C divided by B. We're saying the phase shift is -2. And now we don't have a C value yet because that's what we're looking for. And we don't have a B value yet, but we know that the math we did before, so the math that we did on period before, this whole math would still be relevant. This would still be the exact math I would do to find the period. The period is 8. Then we would set 8 equal to 2 pi over b. We get that b is equal to pi over 4. So let's see here. Let's fill in the things we know. B is equal to pi over 4. D is -2. All right, now we can finish solving this. C divided by B is pi over 4. To get this, I'm going to simplify the fraction first, and then I'll solve for C. So I'm going to multiply by 4 on top and bottom over here. Top and bottom of that fraction. So now I get -2 is equal to 4C divided by pi, because these cancel. To get C by itself, I will multiply both sides by pi over 4. Pi over 4. And it cancels the pi's. The 4's cancel. You're left with C is equal to -2 pi over 4. So C is equal to, this simplifies to negative pi over 2. C is equal to negative pi over 2. Now, when you plug C in, it becomes minus negative pi over 2. So it becomes a plus sign. So this becomes plus pi over 2. Finally, the only thing we have to figure out is what A is. Now, we're looking at a cosine function this time, right? This is cosine. And it's starting at the bottom. And that means that the A value is negative. So amplitude is 4. A is negative. That means that A is -4. So there it is. That's the answer. Y is equal to -4 cosine of pi over 4 x plus pi over 2 minus 2. And in fact, hold on. All right. So in fact, let me just pull it up here quickly on a graphing calculator. So what I have both of these equations written in that we said represent the same graph. And first of all, look, it sure does look identical. There's that -2 to 6. And remember the midline when we started here for sine, it was and then it ended here at 8. Anyway, I have them both written in. Now the bottom one I don't have displayed yet. But if I turn it on, look, it's the same function. So if I turn off both of them and then just turn on the bottom one, and then the top one, it's the same. They look very different, but they represent the same function. How cool, huh? All right. That's it for this video. That's it for this section. I love graphing. I think it's a lot of fun. I'm about to go make a video on how to use the Alex graphing tool. So that'll be up soon. And Well, if you're watching this in the future, it's up now. All right. Have a good one. I'll see you in the next section. Oh, actually, next chapter. All right. Bye.